We read in this week's portion, Vayikra. Vayikra el Moshe. And he called to Moshe, V'yidaber Hashem elav me'ol moed lemor. And Hashem had spoken to him from the Ol Moed, from the communion tent, saying, Vayikra el Moshe. So Rashi cites the Chazal, the Midrash, Yochel afal lafsokas hoisa kriyo. He called him. What is calling? Calling, Rashi says, L'chol dibros chol amiros l'chol tzivuim kodme kriyo. That before he communicated any information to Moshe, it was predicated on calling him, to inform him that he was about to inform him with some subject matter. So therefore, every formal statement, every informal statement that was said to Moshe, which was the communication of Torah, was predicated on Vayikra, calling. Loshen chiba. It's the expression of love. Loshen shemalchei shoros mishtamshim bo. It's an expression which the ministering angels utilize this expression. Shenemar, as it says, v'kora zel zeh. They call the various echelons of angels, they call to one another. Prior to saying the Kedusha, Vayikra is an expression of chiba, of love. Why is it an expression of love? If you're interested in the individual and you want the person to have full benefit from what you're about to communicate, you want that person to have his fullest focus and attention on what you're about to communicate to him. So by first calling him, that will guarantee that he should have that level of focus. Because you want that person to be the greatest beneficiary of what you're about to present to him. So that's the reason why it's a Loshen Chibo. It's an expression of love, concern, and value of the person. So first, it's Vayikra Moshe. He calls to Moshe to inform him that he has to prepare himself to have the focus and the attention for what's about to be communicated to him. But to the prophets of the world, Nigal aleim b'loshen arai. He appeared to them with an expression of incidental, happenstance. V'tuma, shenema vayikra elokim el bilom. Vayikra, mikra, happenstance. I mean, the way I'm explaining it, what did God communicate to Bilam? Not Torah. Something which is communicated, which is significant, and it's the utmost in value, that you need to focus. Something which is really irrelevant versus the totality of existence is less than secondary. Primary needs the focus. One needs the fullest capacity to be able to maximize on what's being communicated. If the world was created for Torah, and the world, the objective of existence is Klal Yisrael, because they are the only people who have the capacity to process the Torah and to bring about the perfection which is needed in existence. And as the Navi says, L'chvodi barosiv, the only nation brings about God's glory is only Klal Yisrael. So if so, and the God's glory can only be brought about only through the Torah. So what level of focus and understanding and attentiveness does one need for the Torah? You need the utmost. Therefore, Vayikra. Vayikra, you have to first be called to get the fullest attention, to understand and have an appreciation, to benefit and maximize on what's being communicated. The prophets and nations of the world, what is their value? Their value, even the nations of the world, what is their value? They have no innate value unto themselves. Their value is only to accommodate the Klal Yisrael, only to minimize the distraction of the Jew from Torah. That is their ultimate objective. For instance, there's the famous argument between Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon Yochai. What is the proper approach to life? What is the prescription of life? So, Rabbi Shmuel says that in the plowing season, you should plow. In the sowing season, you should sow. In the reaping season, you should reap. In the threshing season, you should thresh, and so on and so forth. And the time that you have left, you study Torah. So Rabbi Shimon Yochai says, but if a person is preoccupied with all the mundane involvements of the life, Torah matei oleh. What's going to happen to the Torah? One's full occupation, every moment of one's existence has to be involved in investing in spirituality, which is the Torah itself. Godel ha-Talmud, ha-Talmud lima, as the Gemara says in Kedushin. How does one come to actualize the Torah? It's only through the study of Torah. So what affects us? What refines us? What spiritualizes us? What gives us the capacity to fully appreciate God and service of Hashem? It's only the Torah. So Rabbi Yochai says, for that you can't afford any level of distraction. Besides the infinite value of every moment of the Torah itself. So what does he say? We study Torah. We study the Torah, and the Gentiles, the nation, they'll do our bidding. They will bring in our harvest. They will do all the mundane chores and activities in the world. So the Gemara asks, but the second paragraph of the Shema, it says, Voyim Shua Tishmal Mitzvosai, Asher Anoch Mitzavis Chayom. It says, Vosapti Dugonecho, that if you listen to my mitzvos, you will bring in your grain. So we see here, you're doing the mitzvos, and yet you bring in your own grain. It's not being delegated through the nations of the world. So Rabbi Shimon Yochai says, Einam osim b'ratzon shel makom. That's when you're not truly doing the will of God. But if you truly do the will of God, osim tzon shel makom, melachta nasus al yedei cherim. One's chores, one's mundane activities are delegated through others. I mean, how do we understand it? Factually, the opening statement of the second paragraph of the Shema is Vayim Shema Tishmal Mitzvosai Asher Anochim Mitzav Eschem Hayom Lavos Hashem Elokechem U'La'avdo B'chol Vavchem Chol Nafshechem, to love Him with all your heart, with all your soul. I mean, how could? But Rishim says that's Einam Osam Ritzonu Shel Makom. That's the person who does not fully do the will of God, and that's why you have to do your own bidding. You have to bring in your own harvest. The non-Jew will not bring it in for you. It's interesting, there's a verse in Torah that says, the nations of the world, when they will still see the name of Hashem called upon you, they will revere you. And the Gemara says, when will they see the name of Hashem upon us? It's at Tefillin Sharosh. They'll see the Jew wearing Tefillin Sharosh. It will create a level of reverence and trepidation and a level of esteem that they're going to gravitate to you. Meaning, if a non-Jew reveres the Jew, esteems the Jew, and feels it a privilege to be associated with the Jew, so it would be his privilege, his honor, to accommodate the Jew, that he should not be distracted from his focus. But what do you need to be that? That means there has to be something innate in the person where there's such an obvious aura of holiness and kedusha and spirituality that even the Jew cannot process it. He doesn't know what it is, but he knows it's special. And because he senses its specialness, its holiness, therefore he wants to be associated with it. And he wants to accommodate it. And he feels it's his privilege. As we say, the giving is the taking. As much as he gives of his time, he's the beneficiary. That's Ro'am ha'oretz kishem Hashem nikra olech of yor mimeko. So how we're asking, how is the second paragraph of the Shema, Vo'im Shmo Tishmal Mitzvosai, if you will listen and adhere to my mitzvos, L'avdo b'chol vavchem chol nafshchem, to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. V'nosatim v'savti t'gonecho. Shimon Yochai says it's Einam Osam Ritzono Shel Makom. So there's the famous Medrash Tanchuma Mention the Chumash says, what's the difference between the first paragraph of the Shema and the second paragraph of the Shema? There's a word which is omitted in the second paragraph of the Shema. In the first paragraph of the Shema, the Torah says, it speaks about with all your heart, with all your soul, giving your life, and with all your possessions, with all your material. The word ma'odchem is not mentioned in the second paragraph. First, the first paragraph is in the singular, in the singular. The second paragraph is with all your hearts and with all your souls. Doesn't say doesn't say with all your possessions. And possessions doesn't only mean your material possession, means all your comforts, all your desires. You're not willing to sacrifice your desires, your physical desires on behalf of Hashem. So the Mishnah Chumash explains it this way. This Mishnah Chumash is the portion of Noach that we find that when Klal Yisrael was off the Torah at Sinai, we said Nasiv Nishma. We accepted it unequivocally. We will do, we will hear. And then afterwards, the Torah tells us, we stood under the mountain. God gave us an ultimatum. Either we accept the Torah, if not, we'll be buried under the mountain. The world will revert back to pre-existence. So Mishnah Chumash asks, if we already accept it unequivocally, not even knowing the extent of the obligation, why is God compelling us and forcing us, coercing us to accept the Torah? So the Mishnah Chumash answers that what we said, Nasiv Nishma, that was on Torah Shebechsav. That's the written law, doing the mitzvos. But Torah Shebal Peh, which requires a selfless level of sacrifice and dedication to the study of Torah, where you have to actually sacrifice all your physical involvements, all the physical amenities and desires of life, and you have to dedicate them and fully immerse yourself in the study of Torah, that they weren't willing to do. They weren't willing to do that. Because the only way you could come upon the truth of Torah, you need a level of negation of physicality and removal of yourself from physicality to achieve spirituality, become spiritualized, because only then could you come upon the truth of Torah. Anything less than that, you cannot come upon the truth of Torah. That they weren't willing to do. We're willing to go 90% of the way. Be fully invested, that we're not willing. God put the mountain over their heads. You have to accept. If not, you will be buried under the mountain. That's the Mishnah Chumash. So the Mishnah Chumash continues. The Mishnah says, how many individuals are willing not only to love God with their hearts and with their lives, but even to give away their desires, to exchange their physical desires for spirituality, to be fully invested? Those are very few numbers. That's singular. Those are singular numbers. What about with all their hearts and with all their lives, souls, even to die? Those are the multitudes. Those are the masses. They're willing. But assets, material, whether it's the physical material or it's the desires, that you don't find by the masses. Therefore, what does it say? So there. You love God with all your hearts and soul. But Rashi Michai says that's what does God ultimately want? Be fully invested. Fully investment means on all three levels. Levavchem, nafshem, odechem. Modchem, with your assets, with your physical assets. Therefore, because you're not fully invested, you're not willing to give up the material, therefore, vasavta degonecho. You're willing to give away the material, God says, I will compensate you, fully compensate you. You'll delegate it through the nations of the world. But if you're not, then you do your own bidding. So therefore, this is where Shimon says that's an Einam Osam Ritzon. Of course, relatively to doing less, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal accomplishment. But in terms of the objective and the potential and the capacity of the Jew, you're falling short of what you're capable of doing. Therefore, that's Einam Osam Ritzon Shemokom, and therefore, you must bring in your own harvest. It's interesting. The Gemara tells us that Chizkiel Melech Yehuda, Chizkiel the king of Judah, that This is after the 10 tribes were exiled. And there was only 3 tribes. There was Levi, Yehuda, and Binyamin. Those were the 3 tribes, and they were located in the Jerusalem area. And Sancheriv, who was the Assyrian king, he came to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara tells us that Chizkiyahu HaMelech, his father, was an evil man. Evil. He was an idolater. When he became king, he gathered all the Klal Yisrael together into a large basilica, and he takes a Sefer Torah, takes a sword, and puts them next to one another. And he makes a proclamation to all Jews. He says, I'm giving an ultimatum. Either you live by the Torah, or you're going to be pierced by the sword. That's the choice. Meaning, I give you no choice. We have to shore up our spirituality. We have to establish and secure ourselves as the Am Hashem. The only way it can be done is through Torah. If not, it's not living. Therefore, you'll be pierced by the sword. So the Gemara says, within 2.5 years, Midon vad Beersheva, from Don to Beersheva, every woman and child was fully proficient in the laws of Tumah V'Taira, the laws of purity and impurity. That's how quickly it happened. So what happens? Now, Sancheriv, the Assyrian king, is coming with millions of troops to destroy the Beis HaMikdash and destroy the remnant of Klal Yisrael. So Hashem says, should I inform Chizkiyahu, and he will go out to do battle with them? Should I? He says, Chizkiyahu, the oil lamp burns day and night. He has the Jewish people committed to Torah continuously. Well, do I have to distract him? Why should I distract him? What happened when Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda became the king? We know that Eretz Yisrael had vineyards, very valuable vineyards. He let the fruit rot on the vine. Could you imagine? You have this valuable produce. He let it rot on the vine because he felt it was a question of what? Of compromising the Torah. If you take out time to bring in the harvest. This is literally Shemi Yechoy. He let it rot on the vine. What would somebody say? This is totally being irresponsible. God gifts you with such valuable produce. How do you let it rot on the vine? But there's an expression. Penny wise, pound foolish. Let's say it's a question of bringing in the harvest and you're able to mine gold nuggets, which each nugget is 10 pounds. Do you pick the few grapes off the vine? Were you able to mine gold nuggets or diamonds, 100 D-florets carats diamonds? Would that be considered foolish? If you understand the infinite value of Torah, which Chizkiyahu Melech understood that, let it rot on the vine. This is foolishness. How do you exchange one for another? That was his level of clarity, and he communicated it to the Jews. Even the women and the children understood what the value of their spirituality is through the study of Torah. How was he compensated? The Machne, the camp of Sancheriv, when they were destroyed by Gabriel, the archangel, in one swoop, and they fled, the rest of the camp fled, there was endless amounts of wealth just strewn all over the roads. Endless values of money. So they were compensated endless times over. So for the fruit, the produce rotting on the vine, God gave multiples and multiples. It was almost like Bizas Mitzrayim. It was like the spoils of Egypt. They were compensated. What is this? This is what? You do what God wants, God will compensate you. But what you need. What did Chizkiyahu institute? To what level did he inspire them? Not only were they willing to serve God with all their hearts and with all their souls, to die, they're willing to forego even the material. All our energies are invested where? Even for the sake of what? For the sake of spirituality. We're willing to forego the material pursuits and the material desires. This is what? But how many people? These are individuals. What Chizkiyahu HaMelech was able to accomplish was out of the ordinary. And that's why he was originally meant to be Mashiach. This is Messianic times, where people come to a level of understanding of what the value of Torah is. This is something you surpass all the barriers. This is Torah Tavlin. This is the ultimate antidote. Ner mitzvah Torah or. If you take a light and you illuminate something and you see its value, it's not comparable. Once mentioned, a Yalkut, the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu makes a presentation to Klal Yisrael, and he says, I'm presenting to you life and death. Ubacharta b'chaim. If you say to a person, there's a raging fire, an inferno on one side, and there's paradise on the other. Do you say to the person, there's life and death, I'm begging you, please choose life. I mean, a person has to be insane not to choose paradise over the inferno. Goes in the inferno, instantaneously he's incinerated. And it's in a moment. You don't even have to go into the fire. You get close enough, you're incinerated. So Moshe Rabbeinu has to say, B'charta b'chaim. So the Medrash says, what is it analogous to? A person comes to a crossroads, and there's an old wise man at the crossroads. If you look to the right, as far as the eye can see, disastrous. The road is broken, boulders, mountains, ravines, snakes, predator animals. Expose yourself to a level of danger not to be believed. And the going is really very difficult going. And if you look to the left, straight roads, no hills, no valleys, everything straight, beautifully planted, safe as far as the eye could see. It's a pleasure. And the old man sees this person looking both directions, to the right, to the left. He says, young man, I know what's going through your mind. You're taking the left road. But I've lived a long life. I want to explain you something. You see the road to the right? Initially it looks disastrous and almost impassable. But after 3 days' travel, you're going to come upon a level of beauty and safety and value that you can't even fathom what that value is. But it's a 3-day trek. The going is tough for 3 days. After 3 days, it's a level that you're going to soar. You're going to be spiritualized, and you're going to be enthralled by whatever you're going to see there. The horizons, the vistas that are going to open, it's something you can't even conceive. It's not fathomable. To the left side, what you see 3 days travel is something of one of a kind of a beauty. After 3 days pass, you're going to come upon tragedy and pain and suffering. That's something you can't even imagine. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, what is this world? This world is not easy. Not easy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktik tzadikim k'chut hasayro. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is exacting with tzadikim, tzadik v'ralo. We see things which boggle our minds. We don't understand what goes on. There are many things in life that irk us, that literally destabilize us. We see things not to be believed. The Holocaust. How do you deal with it? It's not simple. Tzadik b'musa yicheh. The Navi says the tzaddik, he lives based on his faith. He has his unshakable faith in Hashem. That's how he's able to endure all this and not be distracted. It's purely based in belief and trust in Hashem. It's not easy. What about if you're deprived? What about if there's illness? What about there's many other things? Despite that, you hold the road. You go straight and you don't get distracted. But after 120 years, what happens? Because of your unswerving faith and dedication and spiritualization, despite everything, what is Olam Haba? You merit a level of eternity which cannot be quantified under any circumstance. It's a 3-day trek. If you take 120 years, or you take 70 years, 80 years, and you compare it to eternity, relative to eternity, what is 70 years? 3 days, 3 moments. It's a 3-day trek. And if you take the left road, 3 days, you're wallowing in whatever you're wallowing in. What happens after those 3 days? There's a level of suffering not to be imagined. The Ramban writes that all the travails and suffering of Yov combined is less pain than 1 moment of Gehenna, of spiritual spiritual hell. Worse than that. So what is that? But you have this world. So what are we talking about? A moment, you can change a moment of what? Of benefit, which seems to be benefit, for eternal suffering. Moshe Rabbeinu says, "B'charta b'chaim." Don't be foolish. Don't look at the moment. Look at the expanse of life, which is forever. That's a b'charta b'chaim. So who's willing to forego the material? The one who appreciates what the ultimate is. Chizkiyahu Melech was able to communicate this with a clarity that even children who aren't even fully developed intellectually, he created as such an environment, such a draw, a magnetism to spirituality, that even the children and women from Don ad Beersheva were fully proficient in the laws of Tumah V'Taira. It doesn't say they were proficient in the laws of Shabbos, laws of kashrus. It's understood. What does purity and impurity represent? That's the consequence. If you invest your life properly, that's purity. If you corrupt yourself and you involve yourselves in the impure, that's contamination. That's what he's able to communicate. What are Nevi'ah Umas Olam? What is their value? What are they supposed to communicate? Look what Bilam did too. What was his advice? And even, as I said, Bilam, why did God give the nations of the world such a prophet who was, in certain aspects, was the equivalent of Moshe? So the nations of the world shouldn't say, you've given the Jews Moshe, what did you give us? We didn't even have a chance. So Hashem says, look, I'll give you Bilam. See what you do with him. So they commissioned him to curse the Jews, to destroy Klal Yisrael. We should be wiped off the face of the earth. But factually, could you compare what kind of choice is it? You take the most inferior type of material versus the most quality material. Well, you gave me material, you gave him material. Is it a comparison? Moshe Rabbeinu is the ultimate of the ultimate. And this man is what? Is the worst of the worst. Well, but I gave you a prophet. So what chance did they have? So what I said was, the Gemara says at Kabbalah Satorah, the world, when God brought heaven to earth onto Sinai, the world didn't have the capacity to contain God's presence. So what happened? The world quaked to a point where it felt like the world was coming to an end. So all the nations of the world ran to Bilam. They said, Bilam, our prophet, God's destroying the world. He says, why? He says, because the world is quaking to a point that seems to be the world is just going to fall apart, and we're all going to die. He says, but it's not possible, because God made a covenant with creation. He's not going to destroy the world at the time of the great flood. So they said to him, it's true, but the covenant was with water, but maybe he's destroying the world with fire. So he says, you fools, don't you realize God is giving the Torah to his people? That's why the world is quaking. Because God has just descended from heaven onto earth. That's why the world is quaking. Hashem oz lamo yitain. God is giving his people his power. So what did the nations of the world answer? Hashem yivorech esam v'shalom. God should bless his people, and we're out of here. We're back to idolatry. You understand? If you understand what it means to be associated with God, the world is quaking to a level that you believe the world's coming to an end. And you know what this is? God is giving his ultimate, his power to his people. So why don't you have an interest in taking part of that power? Maybe you should join. Maybe you should convert. Look, as long as it doesn't affect us, we feel safe, we're in a safe haven, we have no interest. We have no interest in God. That was his value. That was their first and last chance. What they should have said is, we want to become part of that. That is the value, the Nevi'ah U'Olam. Beyond that, they have no value. They have no value. And that's the story. So one is Loshen Chiba. I call you because that's an expression of something which is significant, which is the ultimate. The ultimate is Bereshis Bara Elokim. The Torah was created for this and only this. Therefore, you need full focus. You have to be attentive. Therefore, before the communication happens, we have to get your fullest attention. That's Vayikra, a full calling. It's not just happenstance, incidental. Incidentally, you overhear something over here. This is Kihem Chayinu V'Orech Yameinu. This is the essence of our existence. Therefore, the level of attentiveness and level of, because the analysis that you need to be able to understand what's being communicated and lack of distraction is something not to be believed. If you read about Rabbi Brisker, Chaim Brisker was today, all the Torah that's studied in the Torah world is based upon his analytical approach, how to evaluate and how to understand Torah. Chaim Brisker, Chaim Soloveitchik, read about him, his level of concentration. There were times where he would focus on a thought, and he could stand in one spot, one place for 8 hours without moving, as if he was in a trance. This was his level of what? Of depth and of concentration. Who gives anybody that level of thought? Evidently, it has to be something of exceptional value and purpose. He understood what? A detail. But what's the detail? What if the detail which has greater value than the world combined? Everything. To what degree would a person work for that? A person works 20 hours a day to earn so many $1 million a year, even less than that. And it's a question whether he will succeed. Sacrifices his family and plus more. And it's questionable whether there will be a return and what the value of that is. Something which is infinitely invaluable. And it's definitely that, and if you invest, you will have a return on the investment in multiples. So you shouldn't give it that level of analysis and that level of concentration and remove every level of distraction. But you have to appreciate it. You have to appreciate what its innate value is. That was Rabbi Brisker. He understood it. So it says, Vayikra Moshe called him, as I said, it's an expression of love to be attentive. So Rashi explains, maybe even for the pauses, he had to be told, now we'll pause, now you focus, now you reflect. For what was being communicated, he had to be informed in advance for the focus, but not for the pauses. Now, what's the value of the pauses? What was the value? What was the context of the pauses? What was there? To what degree did that affect? To give Moshe time to reflect on one portion to the other and one subject matter to the other. That was the value of the pause. So, for the communication, had to be informed in advance, this is being communicated. Because that is what? That's the focus on what's being communicated. But for the pause, now it's time to pause, to reflect, he didn't have to be informed. God did not call him for that. So, Kal v'chomer lehejet, Tolomid ben Hejet, here Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah from the omnipotent one, God himself, he had to had pause and had to have this level of focus. So a commoner who studies from a commoner, how much definitely needs the reflection and the pause and the focus to be able to come upon and understand what's being taught to him. So I ask the question. It says, what was the value of the pause? For Moshe Rabbeinu to reflect from one portion to another and from one subject matter to another. Now, we find, the Chazal tells, the Midrash tells us, that God taught Moshe the Torah its entirety. Every single day. You know what it means? Torah Sheba'al Peh. Speaking about, as the Navi says, it's longer than the earth and wider than the ocean. It's literally, relatively speaking, infinite. It is infinite. But relatively, even within the capacity of Moshe Rabbeinu, relatively speaking, it's infinite. He taught him the Torah its entirety in one day. At the end of the day, what happened? He forgot. The second day, again he repeated it. And this repeated itself for 40 days. Finally, on the 40th day, he taught it to him again, what he taught him the previous 39 days. On the 40th day, he retained it all. So the question I asked was, if he was able to retain it after the 40th day, which was miraculous in itself, I mean, God couldn't perform the miracle on the first day, then he should retain it. What exactly was what was God communicating to Moshe Rabbeinu? The person says, I have such a phenomenal mind. I'm able to grasp things instantaneously. There's nothing that's beyond my grasp. You teach it to me, I will get it immediately. Now, what is the human faculty, intellectual faculty? It's a physical faculty. The information that it processes and that it's geared to process is physical information. Torah, although Torah itself, in terms of the way it manifests itself and its application isn't physical, because we live in a physical world, but what's its innate value? What's its significance? It's totally spiritual. So how do you have a physical faculty retaining and processing something which has infinite worth and infinite value? It's not possible. So how do we retain it and how do we understand it? How do we process it? That's called siyata dishmaya. That's called divine assistance. Without divine assistance, regardless how brilliant you are, you're not able to retain it, you're not able to what? To understand it. Chazal tell us, the Pasuk states, Zos HaTorah, Odom Kiyomas Bo'el. This is the Torah, man who dies in the tent. So Chazal tell us, Ein HaTorah niknes el misha meimes atzmo aleo. The Torah cannot be acquired only by the one who's willing to die for Torah. What does it mean die? You're willing to compromise your physicality for Torah. If you're willing to compromise your physicality for Torah, then you're able to acquire it. That's one expression of Chazal. There's another expression of Chazal, Ein HaTorah miskayemes el misha meimes atzmo aleo. It can only be retained by a person who's willing to what? To sacrifice, to die for it, to compromise his physicality. What's the understanding? What's the understanding? The understanding is, if a person is willing to forego his physicality for the sake of spirituality, what does he become? He becomes a repository of spirituality. He himself becomes spiritualized. If you become spiritualized to such a degree that you negated every aspect of your physicality, so what is your capacity now? Your capacity is a spiritual capacity. So the Torah that you process and the Torah that you want to retain has relevance to the location. So it has relevance to the location, therefore you're able to process it and you're able to retain it. But a person's not willing to sacrifice and die for the Torah and compromise his physicality for the Torah. So you have a physical domicile, a physical storage location. It has no relevance to what you want to put there. There in a Torah niknes, the Torah will not be acquired, will not be miskayemes, cannot be retained there. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was communicating to Moshe through the forgetting 40 times. The fact that everything is said and done, what happened? But it was a miracle, but it was still a miracle. The lesson was taught well, was understood, but it was a miracle. So if it's a miracle, what does Moshe need? Reflection. It says, we needed pauses. What was the value? The pause that Moshe should reflect on what Hashem taught him. But what do we need? If he's able to communicate him levels of information and depths of information, which you have to live endless lifetimes to be able to even understand a fraction of that, since miracle, what does Moshe need? If God is communicating, he understands it instantaneously. And repeating it 40 times, that itself should be sufficient. And not only that, there's a famous medrash. The medrash says, Moshe tells Klal Yisrael in Devarim that when he was in heaven for 40 days and 40 nights, he says, Lechem lo ochalti mayim lo shasisi. He says, I did not eat bread, I did not drink water. Why is that so important for us to know? Whether he did eat bread, he did drink water, is that important for us to know? So the Medrash says, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Kishem shemosarti domi v'chel bioleo, as I was willing to give my fat and my blood for the sake of Torah, because he didn't eat. And that's why I had the capacity to acquire the Torah. So what level of sacrifice does the person has to have? You have to negate your physicality. The more you negate your physicality, the greater levels you have to spirituality. That's the spiritualization of the person. Then you become the domicile. You become the repository for Torah. And yet everything becomes geared to be able to process that. So my question is, so if Moshe Rabbeinu is being taught and he has the capacity, why does he need the pauses to reflect, to understand what Hashem taught him? It's to reflect on each portion and each subject matter. If God is communicating it to you, and God is the ultimate teacher, and there's nothing beyond God, and it is miraculous, Moshe still has to reflect. Why does he have to reflect? So what do we see here? That Moshe Rabbeinu, you need some human initiative. It's not enough that God just communicates. You need human initiative. You know what this human initiative is? This is your guide to Motzos Tamin. Even though everything is Siyata Deshmaya, everything is divine assistance. But how do you activate that divine assistance? You have to take initiative. You have to reflect. God presents the Torah, but you have to apply yourself. You apply yourself to your best ability, you will merit the understanding. The reflection will, now you reflect, but you can reflect from today for forever. A person, lahavdil, looks at hieroglyphics, or looks at a language, alphabet he was never taught how to read. I'm reflecting on it. You can't, there's no way to figure it out. Torah, you reflect sufficiently, even at a minimal level, but it's to your fullest capacity, it will be revealed to you. You'll be able to understand the depths of whatever you're reflecting upon. That's called Siyata D'Shmaya. That's your guide to Motzos Tamin. If you toil in Torah, you will come upon it. Yogata Motzosa, and as I always say in the name of Reb Chaim Brisker, it doesn't say Yogata Hivanto. You toil, you will understand. You will find it. It's a gift. It will be gifted to you. A person digs for a treasure, and you find the treasure. Did you create the treasure? You found the treasure. So what do you have? You have to remove layers and layers of earth to come upon the treasure. Now, how do we peel away all those layers to come upon, to merit the gift of Torah, the gift of truth? Yogato, Motzosa. You will find it. It's a find. It's not then you will understand. It's a gift of God. That's what it is. That's the reason why it had to be what? He needed the reflection, because that's the human input. That was his investment. That's the reflection. There's a Gemara. The Gemara tells us that there were two Amoraim. There was an Amora, his name was Avimi, and Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda was the student of Avimi. And at one time, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law was not recorded. Everything was committed to memory. It was oral. So it says that Rav Chisda had studied Tractate Menachos by Avimi. That was his Rebbe. And for some reason, Avimi, the Rebbe, forgot the Tractate at Menachos. He forgot it. For what, maybe? Like the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef, he was ill, and he forgot, as a result of his illness, he forgot part of his learning. So Avimi forgot. So Avimi had to be retaught the Tractate. It's a large Tractate. So he went to a student, Rav Chisda, says, could you teach it to me? What I taught you, now you teach it to me, because I forgot it. So Rav Chisda says to his Rebbe, Avimi, should I come to you to teach it to you? So he says, no, I'll come to you. So it means the teacher, the Rebbe, is going to the student. So he says, why? He says, because it's better to do it that way. It will work out to be better. So Rashi in his commentary says, why is it better that the teacher should come to the student? And he cites the Gemara, Yogata Motzos Tamin. You know what it means to compromise? You're the Rebbe. I should compromise myself for my student. That you're willing to negate yourself, to show humility for the sake of Torah. When it comes to Torah, there's no ceremony. There are no airs. There are no laurels. You do what you have to do. I will come to my student. So that compromising his honor for the sake of Torah, that's yogato. That's the investment. That's yogata motzos tamin. That's what it's about. And the more you go and you forego and you compromise your physicality, then you merit that. You merit that special siyata d'shmaya. The Rambam writes in regard to Kesed Torah, if one wants to acquire the crown of Torah, the Rambam writes, of course he quotes the Mishnah, Pas Melch Tochal, bread and salt you should eat, Maim Sur Tishter, you should drink water in small measures, Alor Etz Tishan, you should even sleep on the ground, which is not comfort, Chai Tzar Tichya, even to live a life of pain, of deprivation. If you're willing to do all that, you have relevance to acquire the Kesed Torah, the crown of Torah. Anything less than that, he says, and don't waste your time. If you waste your time in eating and drinking and frivolous behavior, you have no relevance to acquire the Kesed Torah. So I asked the question. The Rambam writes, quotes the Mishnah, Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, were endowed with 3 crowns. With Kesed Kuna, the crown of priesthood, which was given to Aaron and Bonov, to Aaron and his children. With Kesed Melucha, Malchut Melucha, which was given to David and Lazaro. And then you have Kesed Torah, which was given to Klal Yisrael. It's Munach Bezovis. It's lying in a corner for every Jew to partake of. Why? Because the Pasuk says, Torah Tziv to Moshe, Morasho Kilas Yaakov. It's the heritage of every Jew, the congregation of Yaakov. So it's Munachas Bezovis. It's lying in a corner for every Jew to partake of. Every Jew has relevance to have Kesed Torah. So I asked the question, a person who's naturally royalty, when he put the crown on his head, his essence is royalty. The crown only identifies him as the king, as royalty. If you take a crown and put it on a commoner's head, he's not royalty. If a non-Kohen puts on the vestments, the priestly vestments, he's not a Kohen. He's not, because he's not from the progeny of Aaron. So what did the vestments do? It enhances the essence of the person, what he is. So now let's talk about Torah. Before you study Torah, what are you? You're an ordinary person. You study Torah, now you acquire the crown of Torah. The crown only identifies who you are. So if it's only identification, how does that identify me? Before I had nothing, and now because I have knowledge, now I have relevance to the crown. The crown identifies the essence of the person. It's knowledge. So what are Chazal telling us? No. That when a person studies Torah, there's a spiritualization process takes place. If you study it at this very advanced level, at this uninterrupted level, at this dedication level, with this level of sacrifice, there's a metamorphosis which takes place within the person, that there's a transition from a physical being, you become spiritually attuned, fully spiritually attuned. Now, your essence is Torah. Now, if your essence is Torah, it's the equivalent of what? You have the crown of Torah. That's Kesed Torah. You got the motzoso. You have to negate. Ein Torah niknas l'mishameim satzmo. Ein Torah miskayemes. How would you become the repository of Torah? You have to be spiritualized. If simultaneously you have many other things going on, there's a beautiful word from the Chofetz Chaim. He explains. He says on the pasuk on the statement, purify our hearts to serve you with truth. It says it on something else also. He explains, he says, the heart is the location of love. All emotion is the heart. Avas libo, the love of his heart. So he explains, there was this person who was a diamond merchant, and he had exceptional diamonds. And his neighbor knew he had these very exceptional diamonds. He used to keep in an ornate box. And he always wanted to see the diamonds, the neighbor. But he never had the audacity to ask to see the diamonds. One time his neighbor was traveling, and the neighbor with the diamonds comes, he says, I'm going to be away for an extended period of time. I'm concerned that they may be stolen. Could you keep them for me, watch over them till I come back? He was very excited. He says, definitely. So he says, when you give them to me, do I have permission just to look at them? He says, of course you can look at the diamonds. Not a problem. So he waits till he travels out of town. He opens the box, and he sees they're wrapped in silk cloth. He unravels the diamonds. He sees the most exquisite diamonds. Never saw such diamonds like this. And he had an understanding of precious stones. And simultaneously he sees that intermingled with the diamonds, there's decayed apple cores. Apple rinds, apple cores. Doesn't understand. There must be something wrong with this man. I mean, you have something so precious, intermingled with something so precious, you have literally refuse intermingled. There must be something wrong with the man. How do you mix one with the other? How do you associate one with the other? As he says, a Jew has Avos Hashem in his heart. A Jew has many things in his heart. And simultaneously there's other things in his heart also. He loves other things. You love a good time. You love the material. You love that, whatever it may be. Whatever you love. But it's not in conformance with Kedusha. So you have one location, and it's intermingled with holiness, even though it may not be profanity, but it's not appropriate for the dimension of holiness which is contained within that heart. It's like the diamond with this refuse, intermingled. It doesn't go one with another. So what do you need to acquire Kesed Torah? A level of dedication where you negate and you remove yourself and divorce yourself from every level of physicality. The physicality is only there purely to facilitate the spirituality. If it's anything more than that, it's not in conformance. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. So if that's the case, the location is not the spiritual location. That metamorphosis from the physical to be spiritualized, to be considered that you become an object of holiness, it has to be the dedication has to be full dedication. That's the reason why. Person says, and the Rambam says, maybe a person says, I want to have shtei shulchanos. I'll have Torah and I'll have wealth. Whether wealth comes to you, that's a separate discussion. Like the Gemara tells us, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi and his children, they married at two tables. They had Torah and they had wealth. But it's not they sought out wealth. The wealth was given to them. They were endowed with wealth. This has to do with Purim. We find that Mordechai, because of Mordechai, he was the leader. He galvanized them to repent. And because of what he had done, we merited a miracle. It was Napachu, that the decree to every man, woman, and child to be annihilated was annulled, and we were able to kill Amalek. We were permitted by the Persian king to kill for a day or 2 days in Shushan the Amalekites. Okay? Perform the mitzvah. Positive commandment. After Esther revealed to Achashverosh that she was a Jewess, and Mordechai was her uncle, what did Achashverosh do? He took the household of Haman and the ring, and he gave it to Mordechai. All the wealth that Haman lived and died for was transferred to Mordechai. Did Mordechai take any initiative for that wealth? Took no initiative. It was just transferred right into his domain. It's like switching from one account to another. Right? That's all it was. So he says, why? So the Maral of Prague explains that if a person is able to achieve an exceptional dimension of spirituality, God will facilitate whatever's needed for that. And if a person's complete in that, automatically the material shifts because it's appropriate for that. It's not appropriate, God is not going to shift it. It's the same thing. If a person, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi Ubonov and his children, they merited shtei shulchanos, they had Torah and they had wealth, it's not that they took any initiative to acquire wealth. The wealth was, they were endowed with wealth. Because of the dimension of what they represented, the wealth was needed to magnify the glory of Torah. If Torah is looked upon as something which is not prestigious and something special, that's a chil Hashem. So what does the Nasi have? The Nasi is the equivalent of a king. He was a prince. He lived in a palace. Although he lived in a palace, what did Rabbi Yehuda Nossi say? Rabbi Nossi says, the Gemara tells us that before he passed away, it says he lifted his 10 fingers to heaven. It says, Lo nenesi me'olam hazeh afilu betz b'katana sheli. I did not benefit from this world as much as my small finger, my pinky. What do you mean? He lived in a palace. Or regal clothing. Everything was the ultimate. In opulence. It had no relevance to him. Everything was purely l'chvodi baroses, only to magnify kavod shamayim. That, nothing more than that. So if a person, that is the focus and the thrust and the emphasis of his perspective in life, God will endow with that. But what about, you want both? I'd like to have straddle both sides of the fence. One is not in conformance to the other. If that's the case, you receive one doesn't receive the other. just end with this. It says, God spoke a love. Lamaris Aaron. All the communications, although it says, whatever it says in the Torah, God spoke to Moshe and Aaron 13 times. We have 13 exclusions which indicate, which elucidate, it's to Moshe to communicate to Aaron. Aaron did not merit ever a direct communication from God. When it says, Veidav Hashem el Moshe ba'Aaron, it means to Moshe to transmit it to Aaron. How do I know that? Because I have 13 exclusions, which says Ito, with to him or Elov, that it's to him and not to Aaron. But the 13. Why 13? Why not 12? Why not 16? What is the numerical value of Echod? 13. Moshe, to be able to have a direct communication with God, do you know what level of negation you need? What level of total coalescing and attachment to God do you need? There's no difference between you and God. You're cleaving at a level that you've given up your identity. You no longer have an independent identity. Who am I? What's Moshe? Eved Hashem. What is an Eved? A chattel. He has no value unto himself. That's Echod. To be able for God to be united directly to a person, even though it says Aaron was Shokol Kineged Moshe, he was the equivalent Moshe, it doesn't mean in its totality. Moshe was what? Was Onav Mikolodom. He was the most humble. Nachnu Mo. There was not a trace of himself. When there's no trace of himself, then it's Echod. Then it's Elov. That's with him, not to anyone else. But again, and that's why Moshe was able to bring about the ultimate level of spiritualization. There was nothing in his existence, or that he was involved in, which was not purely for the sake of God, so therefore the material had no value, and therefore he was the ultimate Rabbeinu, that he was the conduit for the Torah to be transmitted to Klal Yisrael.